Part 1: The Silence of the Sierra. The air in the high Sierra Nevada was usually a symphony of rustling pine needles, the distant chatter of jays, and the perpetual, whispering sound of water working its way down granite slopes. For Vivian Sterling, these monthly hikes with her daughter, Chloe, were less about fitness and more about finding a small, breathable patch of peace in the 2 years since her world had been ripped apart. Vivian was 32, an emergency room nurse whose competence in crisis was legendary among the exhausted staff at Sacramento General. She was sharp, cool under pressure, and possessed an almost clinical detachment that served her well when coding a patient or dealing with a frantic family. But outside the sterile confines of the ER, she was just a mother navigating the overwhelming silence left by her husband, Ethan. Ethan, a decorated Sacramento PD officer, had been killed in a routine traffic stop that spiraled into something ugly and unforeseen. Now, Vivian's single-minded focus was on Chloe, protecting her from the dark edges of a reality that had already demanded too much. Chloe, at 10, was an old soul wrapped in a wiry frame, with Ethan's unnerving, hyper-aware eyes. She carried the grief differently, processing it not through tears but through an amplified sensitivity to her environment. It was a trait Ethan had always called her police sense, a deep, almost primal ability to register a threat before it materialized. This sensitivity often manifested as acute hearing, but today, it was the opposite that jarred them. They were following a seldom-used deer trail, the rhythm established and easy. Vivian was mentally running through a complex intubation she'd performed the previous night when Chloe suddenly stopped, one small hiking boot planted firmly on a bed of dry pine needles. "Mom," Chloe murmured, her voice barely a breath. She didn't look back, her gaze was fixed deep into the shadowed undergrowth. Vivian paused, instantly alert. "What is it, sweetie? Did you see a marmot?" Chloe shook her head slowly, her brow furrowed with an intensity that pulled Vivian instantly out of her ER bubble. "No. I didn't hear anything. That's the problem." Vivian tilted her head, listening. The forest was present, the scent of cold earth and sap, the dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy, but Chloe was right. The natural noise floor had dropped out. The constant, low hum of the mountain ecosystem had vanished. There was no wind in the higher branches, no bird call, no buzz of insects. Just a terrifying, dense pocket of absolute quiet. It felt like the forest itself was holding its breath. Every instinct Vivian had screamed at her to turn around, to grab Chloe, and run the 5 miles back to the safety of their old Ford Explorer. But the absence of sound had triggered an alarm far louder than any cry for help. It was a vacuum, a sign of something that had deliberately suppressed the noise. Driven by a nurse's professional curiosity and a mother's reckless desperation, Vivian pulled the hood of her jacket closer. "Okay. We'll go check out the old rail spur. Just a quick look." The abandoned section of railway was a relic of a bygone logging boom, a rusting ribbon of track that curved precariously around the edge of a sheer gorge. It was remote, secluded, and exactly the kind of place where things meant to stay hidden were left behind. They moved off the trail and onto the rough, uneven ballast-stones, the silence amplifying the crunch of their own steps. The air grew colder as they approached the deepest part of the gorge, and the shadows thickened. As they rounded the curve, Vivian saw it. It wasn't a body. It was an execution in progress, or rather, an execution savagely interrupted. The man, Damon Thorne, was muscular and powerful, even in his current state of utter brokenness. He was mid-40s, handsome in a harsh, unforgiving way, with a strong jaw now smeared with blood and grime. He was not tied to the rails with rope, he was crudely but effectively welded to the steel tie bar connecting the rails. Thick, crudely applied steel chains wrapped around his wrists and ankles were fused to the iron. The effort suggested not just murder, but ritualistic torture designed to hold him for a slow, agonizing death. A massive pool of deep, arterial blood surrounded him, soaking into the rail bed. He had been shot, the bullet wound high on his left shoulder, clearly designed to incapacitate without immediately killing. His clothes were torn, and his torso bore the horrifying, livid markings of being systematically beaten, suggesting hours, perhaps days, of interrogation and torment. Vivian dropped to her knees without thinking, her eyes immediately scanning the severity of the wounds. The nurse had taken over. The shock of the situation was eclipsed by the immediate, life-or-death need for intervention. She pressed 2 fingers to his carotid artery, the pulse was steady, racing, but present. He was alive, fading fast from blood loss and shock. Then, Chloe clutched her mother's arm, not looking at the injured man, but over Vivian's shoulder, towards the dense woods below the track. Her eyes were wide, and the fear in them was crystalline. 4 of them, Mom, Chloe whispered, her voice tight with suppressed panic. I smell oil and metal. They're close. They're moving in a wide line. Vivian looked up, her gaze snapping from the victim's face to the surrounding perimeter. That's when she saw them, not the usual amateur thugs or hunters, but professionals. 4 figures in high-tech digital camouflage, moving with a silent, fluid precision that spoke of military training and cold intent. They were sweeping the area, clearly checking the trap, realizing their prey had vanished. These were not local criminals. These were highly trained assassins, and they were hunting. The realization galvanized Vivian into a terrifying focus. The danger wasn't future, it was immediate, pressing, and measured in seconds. She pulled the Gerber survival knife from the sheath on her belt, a gift from Ethan, the cold steel feeling heavy and real in her hand. Chloe, listen to me. This is not a drill. I need you to watch those woods. If you see any movement, any shadow, you scream. Vivian's voice was low and steady, stripped of all emotion except intent. She turned back to Damon. The chains were welded, but the craftsmanship was poor, hurried. The welds were rough, the metal brittle in places. She didn't have the tools to cut the chain, but maybe the weak points. She slid the razor-sharp tip of the knife into the gap between the chain link and the rail itself, leveraging it with all her strength against the cheap metal. Crack. The first weld on his left wrist snapped, peeling away like old paint. The noise felt deafening in the silence. She worked on the other 3 points, her heart hammering against her ribs, her mind a cold, calculating machine. Left arm freed. Right arm. Now the ankles. The metal finally protested, tearing with a screeching sound. Ready, Mom. They're turning toward the track. Chloe's voice was a strained gasp. Damon Thorne, despite his horrific injuries, was heavy, a dead weight of muscle and bone. Vivian dragged him by his shoulders, tearing the back of his blood-soaked shirt. Help me, Chloe. Grab his legs. On 3. 1, 2, 3. With a massive surge of adrenaline, the pair hauled the man off the rail. His body flopped onto the rocky bank, a guttural groan escaping his lips. Vivian grabbed a field dressing from her pack and slammed it onto the largest wound, tying a rough tourniquet above the shoulder. We have to go now, Vivian. I hear running. Chloe was already pulling on Vivian's pack strap. Vivian didn't need convincing. She looked once more at the scene of the almost execution, registering the cruelty, the professional precision of the attempt. This wasn't a street crime, this was warfare. I've just saved a man from a firing squad. What the hell have I done? We're taking him to the cabin, Vivian decided, her tone brokering no argument. It's the closest place. We move fast. Stick to the cover of the ravine. Go. They half-carried, half-dragged Damon Thorne down the steep bank away from the track, his blood staining the earth. They disappeared into the dense, forgiving cover of the Sierra woods just as the first shadow in digital camo materialized on the track above them, looking down at the snapped chains and the fresh, horrifying pool of blood. Vivian knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the core, that she had not just rescued a stranger, she had dragged herself and her daughter directly into the crosshairs of something infinitely more dangerous than the grief she had been trying to escape. Her secluded cabin, once a fortress against the world, was about to become a desperate, last-stand casualty collection point. Part 2: The Price of Rescue. The journey from the abandoned tracks to Vivian's remote cabin was a blur of exhausting, adrenaline-fueled terror. The cabin, nestled deep within a thicket of scrub oak and pine, was small and unassuming, hidden from the main access road by almost a quarter-mile of winding, overgrown trail. It was built for privacy and solitude, qualities Vivian had once cherished, but which now felt like a suffocating vulnerability. They managed to haul Damon Thorne, a man whose weight was a testament to his raw physical power, through the back door and onto the sturdy wooden dining table, the only surface flat and stable enough to serve as an impromptu operating theater. Chloe, remarkably, was not hysterical. The experience had frozen her terror into a cold, hyper-efficient clarity, a mirror of her mother's professional composure. She moved with purpose, fetching towels, heating water, and, crucially, standing sentinel at the reinforced back window. "Mom, I saw a light. Just a flash, a mile or two down the valley." "It was systematic, not random," Chloe reported, her voice small but firm, confirming Vivian's worst fears. "The hunters were closing in." "Keep watching, baby. Tell me if the light stops moving," Vivian instructed, her focus already consuming the man on the table. Damon was in severe hemorrhagic shock. His skin was pale and clammy, his breathing shallow and rapid. The extensive lacerations and blunt force trauma across his chest and back were horrific, but the immediate threat was the high-caliber round lodged near his clavicle. Vivian had moved beyond the constraints of the suburban ER. This was field trauma, raw and brutal. She quickly laid out her tools, a comprehensive, if aged, surgical kit purchased years ago for disaster preparedness, sterilized and ready. There was no scrub nurse, no anesthesiologist, and certainly no sterile environment. She had local anesthesia, antibiotics, and a finite supply of 4 fluids. Everything had to count. The bullet, she determined, was a fragmented jacket, resting perilously close to the brachial plexus. She worked with a chilling, fluid grace born of years of practice, making an incision, using forceps, and working by the harsh, focused beam of a headlamp. The scent of copper and antiseptic hung heavy in the air. The nurse's brain, the one that managed crises on the daily, took absolute control. She ignored the bruising, the evidence of torture, and focused solely on the mechanics of the living body beneath her hands. After 40 minutes of intense focus, the fragmented metal clinked onto the stainless steel tray. Vivian cleaned the cavity, irrigated the wound aggressively, and began the delicate process of suturing, sealing the deep pocket where the bullet had rested. When she was done, the table was a mess of bloody gauze and saturated linens, but Damon Thorne's breathing was marginally deeper, his pulse stronger. He was stabilized, for now. Vivian slumped back, exhausted, wiping the sweat from her brow. She looked at Chloe, who had not moved from her post. "Okay, sweetie. You did perfectly. Now go wash up and try to get some sleep. I'll sit with him." Just as Chloe padded out of the room, heading for the bathroom, Damon's eyes snapped open. They were a piercing, unsettling blue, eyes that held a glacial intelligence and a terrifying lack of warmth. He didn't startle or look around. He looked straight at Vivian, his first word a raw, furious curse, uttered through clenched teeth. "You absolute, suicidal idiot," he hissed, his voice a low, gravelly rasp of pain. "Did you touch me?" Vivian stared back, her exhaustion dissolving into icy fury. I just spent the last hour pulling shrapnel out of your shoulder and stopping you from bleeding out on my antique dining table. You're welcome. He struggled to push himself up, only to be stopped by the fierce, throbbing pain. Welcome. You just signed your daughter's death warrant. You, me, and that cursed car you drove in with, you are all marked. You had one job: walk past, call it in anonymously, and save your pathetic life. You idiot. His venom was a physical slap. He showed no gratitude, only monstrous, self-centered rage at her interference. Who are you? Vivian demanded, her own voice rising, shaking with residual adrenaline. The people who were hunting you are military grade. What did you steal? Damon Thorne managed a wry, brutal smile that didn't reach his eyes. I didn't steal anything, nurse. I am what they hunt. My name is Damon Thorne. And I don't run a petty theft ring. He paused, letting the statement hang in the sudden, thick silence of the cabin. I run the syndicate. Vivian felt the blood drain from her face, the fatigue returning with paralyzing force. The syndicate. The name was whispered in certain circles, a sprawling, transnational conglomerate that specialized in weapons trafficking, high-level intelligence brokering, and controlling the flow of everything illicit that moved across borders. Her patient wasn't a victim, he was the head of a hydra. And those four gentlemen in the tactical gear, Damon continued, his voice regaining some strength, they are the Shadow Pact, led by a man named Victor Kirov. We're rivals. I just lost a major bid, and they decided to collect the debt in kind. You've just intervened in a corporate merger, Sterling, and now you're collateral damage. He reached inside his shirt, wincing violently. He pulled out a sleek, heavily encrypted satellite phone. His fingers moved with surprising speed, tapping out a coded sequence. No, 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 Vivian whispered, backing away, clutching the bloody surgical towels to her chest. I saved your life. You owe me. You leave my daughter and me out of this. You call the police. The police? Damon scoffed, lowering the phone just long enough to fix her with a look of pure contempt. Your cop husband's killer is dead, Sterling. But you're about to meet a far worse fate if you involve anyone outside this room. Kirov doesn't do prisons, he does painful disappearances. And you just saved the one man he wanted to erase more than anyone. He put the phone to his ear, his eyes never leaving Vivian's face. The conversation was short, clipped, and conducted in a language she didn't recognize, though the cadence was authority absolute. He ended the call, tossed the phone onto the table, and sighed. It wasn't a sigh of relief, but of grim acceptance. You have 40 minutes, nurse, Damon said. Silas is on his way. He's my chief of security. I told him to trace your car tag. Your vehicle identification number is in the wrong database. They know where you live. Kirov's people are already en route to this exact location. Vivian's mind raced, hitting a wall of absolute panic. A call to the police would take hours, and they would be no match for the professionals Chloe had sensed. 40 minutes. She ran to the living room window. In the distance, reflecting the moonlight off the pavement, she saw it, 3 sets of headlights, high-riding, moving fast. They were not local pickups. They were large, black, heavily modified SUVs. The sound of an engine braking violently and tires spitting gravel announced Silas's arrival. 3 enormous, matte black, heavily armored SUVs, built like mobile bunkers, screeched to a halt outside the cabin. A moment later, the door was nearly ripped from its hinges as a giant of a man, Silas, perhaps 6'5" of pure muscle, with a hawk-like face and eyes that perpetually scanned the tree line, burst in, 2 other armed men flanking him. They were wearing dark, tailored tactical gear, looking utterly out of place against the rustic pine walls. Silas stopped dead, assessing the scene, the injured Damon on the table, the blood, the terrified nurse, the terrified child now peeking around the corner of the hallway. Thorn, Silas stated, his voice a deep rumble of relief and disapproval. What the hell did you do? I survived, Silas. And these two are now targets. Kirov is mobilized. We have 32 minutes until the cavalry arrives. Get them ready to move. Now. Silas didn't question the order. He looked at Vivian, his expression grim. You. We take the necessities. Nothing sentimental. Everything you own stays behind, or it links you to us. You understand? Vivian looked around her cabin. The books, the worn sofa, Chloe's artwork stuck to the fridge, the scent of pine and coffee, the only refuge she had built after the tragedy of losing Ethan. All of it had to be abandoned, instantly forfeited for saving the life of a monster. She walked straight to Chloe, scooping her into a tight embrace. We're playing a game, sweetie. A very fast game of hide and seek. We are leaving our house and going somewhere safe, right now. Chloe, seeing the cold resolve in her mother's eyes, nodded mutely. She didn't cry. She just held her small, beloved stuffed wolf toy tighter. Vivian grabbed two things, her medical bag, now restocked with emergency supplies from the cabinet, and a worn photograph of Ethan. That was it. Everything else was irrelevant, too heavy, too dangerous. In less than 20 minutes, the small cabin was empty, the scent of Damon's blood the only evidence of their presence. Vivian and Chloe were hustled into the back of the lead SUV, Chloe clutching her wolf, Vivian gripping her husband's photo. Damon, heavily medicated and expertly strapped onto a specialized medical stretcher by Silas's men, was secured in the second vehicle. As the column of black SUVs tore down the mountain, leaving the lights of the cabin receding in the rear-view mirror, Vivian watched her life disappear. She had been yanked from her quiet existence not by violence, but by an act of mercy, only to find that mercy carried an unbearable cost. They didn't stop driving until the sun was a faint, bruised purple on the horizon. They drove not to a hideout, but deeper into the belly of the beast. Their destination, Silas informed them with grave seriousness, was the Citadel, Damon Thorne's sanctuary. A mountain fortress where they would be absolutely protected, but completely imprisoned, irrevocably tied to the criminal empire Damon controlled. Vivian had traded the predictable danger of the ER for a constant, high-stakes exposure to global organized crime, all because of the blood she had exchanged for a life. Her new life had just begun. Part 3: Life within the Citadel. The Citadel was not a building, it was a geological anomaly repurposed by immense wealth and paranoia. Tucked deep within an unnamed mountain range, accessible only via a heavily monitored, unmarked road that looked like nothing more than a logging track, the final approach led into the heart of the rock itself. The three black SUVs slid silently through a massive steel blast door, camouflaged flawlessly into the granite face, and plunged into a world of concrete, steel, and controlled atmosphere. Inside, the contrast was immediate and jarring. The rough, earthy smell of the Sierra was replaced by the clean, sterile scent of ozone and advanced filtration systems. Vivian and Chloe were led into what felt like a five-star hotel buried beneath 10,000 tons of rock. The decor was minimalist and functional, dark woods, polished stone floors, and indirect lighting, but every corner hinted at underlying, uncompromising security. Cameras watched every step, and every wall concealed layers of Kevlar and reinforced steel. Damon Thorne was immediately taken to a state-of-the-art medical suite. Vivian watched as a woman with sharp, angular features and eyes the color of sea glass took over his care. This was Dr. Anya Volkov, Damon's personal physician, a woman whose competence radiated from her like a low-grade fever. Anya assessed Vivian with a cool, professional scrutiny that bordered on hostility. "You've saved him. The surgical extraction was effective if reckless. You have talent, Nurse Sterling. Talent that should not be wasted in this viper pit. I didn't choose this pit, Doctor, Vivian retorted, fatigue making her voice brittle. I was dragged in. Anya, however, didn't respond with malice, she responded with a strange, weary understanding. Later that night, while Damon was in a medically induced slumber, Anya found Vivian sitting vigil in the observation room. You're wondering who I am, Anya stated, her Russian accent thick, devoid of warmth but surprisingly clear. I am loyal to Damon Thorne. Not because I was bought, but because I was saved. He deals in death, yes. But he also trades in freedom. 6 years ago, I was trapped in a human trafficking operation in the Balkans, destined for a far worse fate than a bullet. She traced the edge of a monitor with a gloved finger. The Shadow Pack was involved. Damon's people, the Syndicate, were running intelligence against Kirov at the time. Damon found me. He bought my freedom and gave me this facility, this purpose. He's a devil, Vivian, but he has a code. A terrible, brutal code of honor. He will protect what he claims. You and your daughter are now claimed. This revelation was the first crack in the absolute black and white morality Vivian had lived by. Damon wasn't just a criminal, he was a complex, self-serving entity capable of profound cruelty and calculated salvation. He was a force, not a faction. Chloe, meanwhile, was struggling the most. The Citadel was an environment of suffocating safety. She had a sprawling, luxurious suite, access to high-speed internet, and a small, private park built within a cavern, but she had lost her mountains, her routine, and her sense of normalcy. She clung to her mother, silent and watchful. Her acute senses, once a defense mechanism against street danger, were now overwhelmed by the constant presence of heavily armed, silent men. Damon recovered quickly, his formidable constitution serving him well. When he finally stood, the sheer, imposing presence of him filled the room. He was a man of cold, magnetic authority. Their relationship evolved, not into a truce, but into an uncomfortable, strategic partnership. Damon, confined to the Citadel while he rebuilt his operations, relied on Vivian's clinical expertise, especially in managing the high-stress, high-risk security teams. Tell me about your men, Silas, Vivian had demanded, observing a team running drills in the subterranean gym. They're physically perfect, but they're high risk. I bet you don't track their blood pressure or their cortisol levels. Silas, ever stoic, just raised an eyebrow. They're paid to fight, not to be healthy, nurse. They're paid to win, Vivian corrected, crossing her arms. A trained man in cardiac arrest is a liability. A man whose stress levels are peaking will miss the shot. You are operating an expensive machine, Damon. I can make your assets perform better and last longer. Damon, watching the exchange, saw the intelligence in her argument, and more importantly, the steel beneath her ER uniform. She wasn't asking for pity, she was demanding value. He gave her access. Vivian began leading weekly sessions, training Damon's security personnel in Tactical Combat Casualty Care (TCCC). She taught them rapid wound packing, chest decompression, and psychological first aid, skills that drastically improved their survivability. She transformed herself from a liability needing protection into an indispensable asset. 1 week after their arrival, the fragility of their supposed safety was violently exposed. It was 3 a.m. Chloe was asleep in her custom-designed, bullet-resistant suite, which included a reinforced window looking out onto the mountain face. Vivian was asleep in the adjoining room when the shattering sound of a high-velocity impact ripped through the quiet. The Citadel's security protocols instantly locked down, red lights flashing, alarms blaring a silent, digital alert through the compound. Vivian didn't hesitate. She grabbed the Sig Sauer P226 Silas had insisted she keep, moving instantly toward Chloe's room. Silas and Damon were there in seconds, followed by a swarm of armed men. Damon threw himself in front of Chloe's bed, his massive body shielding her. The incident was terrifyingly specific. A bullet, a precise, high-caliber round, had punched through the single pane of glass in Chloe's window that was not rated for direct sniper fire, an oversight in the initial retrofit. It hadn't been aimed at the adults, it was calculated to pass just inches above Chloe's pillow, splintering the headboard. It was not an attempted assassination of Damon. It was a message. Viktor Kirov knew where they were. And he knew about the child. Vivian saw the hole in the wall, the splintered wood, and the tiny, terrified whimper escaping Chloe's lips. The terror of that moment, the cold realization that her daughter was now a piece on a global chessboard, shattered the last remnants of the old Vivian. The passive resilience of the grieving widow evaporated, replaced by the deadly, protective focus of a predator. She turned to Damon, her face pale, eyes burning with a terrifying calm. "This is not a siege, Damon. This is a skirmish. Kirov isn't trying to breach. He's testing the perimeter. He's telling you he can reach my daughter. You need to kill him before he tries again." Damon watched her, seeing the transformation from nurse to something harder, something ruthless. He had seen that look countless times in hardened killers, but never in a suburban mother. "Kirov stays alive for a reason," Damon said darkly. "He has leverage I need." "Leverage just took a shot at my child," Vivian stated, her voice dangerously low. She slid the pistol back into her holster. "I'm not a patient, Damon. I'm not a hostage. I am now an asset. You don't need me safe, you need me indispensable. I want complete access to your operational data. I want to know who is coming and when. I will turn my medical skills into a tactical advantage. You made me a target, Thorn. Now let me become a weapon." Damon Thorn, the man who had ordered executions and manipulated markets, was taken aback. This wasn't bravado, it was a non-negotiable demand born of survival. "Done," he agreed, the single word sealing their pact. He respected strength above all else. "You are now on the payroll, Sterling. You're integral to every operation going forward. You start with Marcus. We found the man who sold me out to Kirov. We're moving on him in 3 days." Vivian nodded, the fear still coiling in her gut, but the purpose was cold, absolute. The Citadel might be a prison, but for the first time since Ethan's death, Vivian Sterling felt truly, terrifyingly alive, driven by a single, unwavering goal, survival, and the absolute destruction of anyone who threatened Chloe. She had stepped across the threshold, trading her oath to heal for an alliance with the darkness, all to secure the only life that mattered. Part 4: The Escalation of Trust. The relationship between Vivian Sterling and Damon Thorn had solidified into something sharper and more profound than mere cohabitation. It was a shared gravity, built on mutual respect for competence under duress. Vivian saw beyond the monstrous facade of the crime lord, she saw the strategist, the damaged man capable of fierce, protective loyalty, a loyalty she was testing daily by demanding transparency and operational inclusion. Damon, in turn, recognized Vivian as the only person in his tightly controlled world who was entirely unbought, driven by a morality that was absolute, yet flexible enough to survive his darkness. The focus for the syndicate was now fixed on Marcus, the high-ranking lieutenant who had betrayed Damon, selling his location to Viktor Kirov. The mission was set for a discreet, overwhelming snatch and grab at a clandestine meeting point in a high-rise in Seattle. The night before the operation, Vivian tracked Damon down in the Citadel's command center, a multi-screen bunker humming with cold calculation. "I'm going with you," Vivian stated, bypassing the usual polite preamble. Damon didn't even look up from the three-dimensional schematic of the target building. Absolutely not. This isn't a training session, nurse. It's hostile extraction. You stay here with Chloe, where the air is filtered and the walls are 20 feet of concrete. And what happens when Silas or one of his men takes a round to the torso? Vivian countered, her voice low and steady. Anya Volkov is brilliant, but she's not a trauma specialist. I taught your men TCCC, Damon. I need to be in the mobile command vehicle. Safe distance, armored protection, but immediately available. You risk assets by leaving me behind. I'm not asking for a romantic getaway, I'm demanding strategic placement. I am an asset, remember? Damon finally met her gaze, a flicker of grudging admiration in his blue eyes. He knew she was right. He needed optimal performance, and having Vivian available meant the difference between a minor wound and a catastrophic loss of personnel. He knew the demand wasn't born of romantic feeling, but of a terrifying, logical devotion to survival. Fine, he ground out. But you stay within the mobile medical bay. You do not leave the vehicle. If the plan deviates, you get out and you drive straight back to the Citadel. Understand? Vivian nodded, the silent agreement a far stronger bond than any formal contract. The raid was executed with characteristic syndicate precision. A rapid, silent breach, overwhelming force, 0 casualties on their side. Marcus, caught completely off guard, was subdued and being rushed towards the extraction vehicles parked in the alleyway below. Damon, having monitored the operation from the rear command vehicle, stepped out briefly to personally oversee the loading of his captive. It was in that critical, exposed moment that the meticulous planning dissolved into chaos. Marcus, his face a mask of rabid fury, lunged forward, his hands surprisingly free beneath the tactical blanket used to restrain him. He wasn't reaching for a gun, he was reaching for Damon's chest. A flash of silver and a sickening thud as a thin, wicked blade plunged into Damon's abdomen. Silas reacted instantly, snapping Marcus's neck with a brutal, efficient motion. But it was too late. Marcus smiled, a twisted, victorious death grin, as he slumped to the concrete. Poisoned. Kirov sends his regards, Thorn. Damon didn't fall. He staggered, his hand instinctively clamping over the wound, his cold focus already fighting the systemic effects. Get him in the vehicle. Now. Vivian saw the flash, the fall, and Damon's immediate, terrifying pallor as he was shoved into the closest armored SUV, hers. He's been stabbed. Marcus claimed it was poisoned. Silas barked through the comms as the vehicle peeled out, joining the caravan in a high-speed, defensive drive out of the city. Vivian didn't wait for orders. The trauma nurse took over instantly. She recognized the rapid onset of neurotoxicity. Damon was sweating profusely, his pupils fixed and dilated, his movements jerky. The poison, whatever it was fast-acting. Silas. Get me the tox kit. Fast, she yelled, pulling her surgical field kit onto her lap. The inside of the rolling SUV became a mobile trauma bay. With the vehicle swaying violently, gunfire erupting faintly outside as the escort cleared their path, Vivian worked in the flickering emergency light. She found the entry point, a small, precise wound near the liver. She needed to staunch the bleeding, extract the remaining toxin, and find an immediate antidote, all while her patient, the man who held her and Chloe's lives in his grip, was convulsing. Stabilize his airway, she commanded one of the security team, a man named Leo, who was already holding Damon down. Vivian ignored the impossible conditions. She cut deeper, finding the wound tract, and with shaking but determined hands, used a suction device to clear the area, desperately trying to reduce the localized spread of the toxin. The surgical lamp was useless in the shifting light. She worked by instinct, her fingers tracing the damaged tissue. She knew she couldn't excise the toxin completely. She needed to support his system. She slammed an 4-line into his arm and began rapid infusion of high-dose corticosteroids and wide-spectrum antitoxins from the emergency kit, praying for a lucky hit. As Damon's body fought the poison, his heart rate spiking to dangerous levels, Vivian began the complex abdominal closure. She was stitching tissue back together while the vehicle took evasive maneuvers, deafened by the roar of the engine and the concussive sound of return fire. Her focus was absolute, life over everything. She wasn't saving the syndicate leader, she was saving the only shield her daughter had. By the time the Citadel's massive steel doors hissed shut behind them an hour later, Vivian had stabilized the puncture wound, slowed the toxin's effect, and kept Damon Thorne alive. She was covered in his blood, shaking violently, but standing tall. Damon was rushed into the intensive care unit, his life hanging in the balance, but thanks to Vivian's surgical mastery under fire, he had a chance. 3 days later, Damon was recovering, lucid, and surprisingly calm. He had watched the security footage of Vivian's frantic, flawless performance in the armored car. The respect he felt had curdled into a primal, possessive devotion. Vivian walked into his sterile suite. She looked him in the eye, her resolve absolute. "You will recover, Damon. And when you do, we will operate on my terms." She didn't ask, she dictated. First, absolute, unedited transparency on every threat. No more secrets. Second, Chloe's well-being and psychological safety is paramount. She gets normalcy, even if it's a controlled version. Third, I established the Sterling Trauma Clinic here in the Citadel. I will treat your men, the foot soldiers, the assets, with the same care I gave you. I will not trade my oath to heal for your protection. I will make my own purpose here. Damon looked at the woman who had literally poured her blood and skill into his fading body. She hadn't just saved him, she had given him a new metric for survival. He needed her. "Done, Vivian," he whispered, a hint of genuine humility in his voice, a rare sound in the Citadel. "Every term. Accepted. You are not my prisoner, or my asset. You are my partner." Part 5, The Ultimate Exchange. 21 days after Damon's near-fatal poisoning, the Citadel was operating under a new, unified command. The Sterling Trauma Clinic was officially established in the lowest tier, a testament to Vivian's resolve, staffed by her and Anya Volkov. Vivian, still primarily an ER nurse, was now also Damon's most trusted advisor, wielding influence born from sheer necessity and competence. It was Silas who delivered the chilling intelligence. Viktor Kirov, enraged by the failure to eliminate Damon and the loss of Marcus, was escalating. He was orchestrating a sophisticated kidnap operation targeting Chloe from her new, highly secured private school. Kirov intended to use the girl as the leverage to force Damon's final surrender. Vivian listened to the details in the command center, not with terror, but with a terrifying, professional coldness she now recognized as her new normal. The time for running was over. "We don't run," Vivian stated, her gaze sweeping from Silas to Damon. "We use it. We use the Citadel." Damon, fully recovered and more formidable than ever, looked at her, his expression a mixture of dread and grim pride. "You're suggesting we use the child as bait, Vivian." "I'm suggesting we use ourselves as bait, Damon. Kirov wants you to surrender to save Chloe. He will come here. He believes this is a safe haven for him to extract his prize. We turn the Citadel into a gravity well. We pull him in, and we crush him." The plan was audacious, to intentionally allow Kirov's team to breach the perimeter, guiding them into the mountain's deepest, most lethal interior choke points. Chloe, fully informed and displaying her father's resilience, was central to the deception, moved under heavy guard but in a way that simulated an extraction opportunity. The plan worked flawlessly. Kirov, arrogant and confident, led the operation personally. When he realized his team was trapped in the internal labyrinth of the citadel, it was already too late. Silas and his men, aided by Vivian's precise real-time casualty assessments, executed the counter-strike with brutal efficiency. Viktor Kirov was apprehended, subdued, and dragged to the deep-level subterranean detention facility. Damon Thorne stood before his vanquished enemy in the stark, concrete chamber. By the Syndicate's immutable code, Kirov's fate was simple: a swift, torturous execution to send a definitive message. Damon raised his hand, ready to issue the final order. But then, the unexpected happened. He paused. Above the cell, through a one-way mirror, Vivian had positioned Chloe. It was an intentional, quiet staging, not to show the violence, but to ensure Damon knew he was being observed by the last fragment of his own conscience. Chloe, her small face serious, was watching him, not Kirov. Damon's hand dropped. He looked at Kirov, then at the reflection of his new life, the life Vivian had pulled him toward. He had spent his existence operating under the old rules: blood for blood, life for life. But Vivian's sacrifice and her unwavering terms had created a new code he was forced to honor. Silas, Damon's voice was steady, cutting through the silence. Call it in. Everything. Kirov, the ledgers, the intel we've gathered on his network, package it all. We are handing Viktor Kirov over to the FBI's International Task Force. Ensure it's a lockdown, no parole conviction. The room went silent. Silas, the loyal consigliere, stared at his boss, utterly stunned by the decision to betray the very essence of the Syndicate's doctrine. This is the last decision I make the old way, Damon announced, not to Silas, but to the mirror where Vivian and Chloe stood. This ends the debt. This ends the war. Not with my hands, but with justice. It is done for her. With Kirov neutralized and Damon's decisive move securing a unique kind of legal protection, giving Kirov to the authorities prevented countless future conflicts, Vivian and Chloe began to carve out their version of normalcy. Vivian severed all ties with her past, embracing the Sterling Trauma Clinic. It became a sanctuary for the injured, not just assets of the Syndicate, but collateral damage from the shadows.